to come in and secure a peace in and for Israel. It's an amazing deal, and it's the kind of deal that if you're a thinking decent person, everyone should be happy with.
Right.
I mean, he achieved in so many ways the impossible, because it did feel like this was intractable. It did feel like that this was either going to go one way or the other, either an all-out war or an all-out we're just out of the region entirely. Instead, he figured out a way to be able to achieve something that I think everybody can nod along to and go, You know what? This is a great outcome. This is probably the best possible outcome.
It really is. And the fact that he's including all these other leaders in the decision-making and urging them to be part of this and to promote peace in the Middle East is just another sign that I think this will be lasting. God forbid something happens that prevents his phases of going through. I believe we're in the midst of phase 2 right now, and then we'll see what unfolds next. But this is exactly what you're saying. It's a huge success from his point of view, and from the point of view of the legacy media, conservative media.
Yeah.
I haven't really checked in on far right media. I'm not totally sure what they're saying about this, but at the end of the day, the hostages are home. There's peace in the Middle East. I don't know if you saw that video of the Catholic children in Gaza celebrating in their Catholic church with the priest. Oh, it's so heartwarming, as these kids that are just celebrating with their priest that the conflict is over. So everyone should be safe now, please God. And I mean, I saw a video yesterday of Hamas executing some of their political dissidents. Don't know the exact details of why these men were being executed, but that is something that we still need to remember, is that these guys are still there. They're still out there, and there are people that might have to deal with them and their violence. And so that's worth absolutely keeping an eye on and seeing what happens next with that, because they need to be disarmed. And that is in my view, that's a huge obstacle, because let's say they are disarmed, they're still going to be out there and they're still going to hold these very, very radical beliefs. So someone's going to have to keep an eye on them. And I'm curious. I've been wanting to ask the president this, or Caroline Leavitt. It just hasn't panned out. But I do really want to know what happens to the Hamas fighters, even if they're disarmed. Are we going to be keeping an eye on them? Is that something that, our counterterrorism division of the FBI would be looking into?
Amen.
I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. No question about that. And regarding the Catholic churches, that's fascinating to hear that. I hope that Catholic churches in the United States will use their prayers of the faithful this weekend to pray for the president. Yeah. A prayer of gratitude and a prayer for wisdom, for that God can guide him. Yeah. Because they should, and they should. It's the most obvious thing. And I just feel like there's just way too many priests who are hesitating to say what's true about this subject, and they should. One of the scoops that you had recently that I wanted to talk to you about is you revealed that in the court proceedings for Brett Kavanaugh's would-be assassin, it came out that this guy calls himself transgender. So this was complete chaos, and it made its way into the to the sentencing. What did you discover about all of this, and how much of a trend is this that people who call themselves transgender end up trying to perpetrate, or do in some cases perpetrate, horrific acts of violence?
Well, Vince, this story has blown my mind, because it's kind of the culmination of all of these different stories that I've worked on for years. I mean, you and I talked about this back in 2022 when the Politico published the leak of the draft opinion from the Supreme Court showing that Roe v. Wade would be overturned. That was years ago, and that leak showed that the justices were about to overturn Roe v. Wade, and that prompted all the protesting outside the homes of the Supreme Court justices. It prompted these crazy far-left groups to post the justices' addresses online, and that prompted a man named Nicholas Roski to travel all the way from California to Maryland, touch down in Dulles Airport, where we've all been, and to get a cab and go to Justice Brett Kavanaugh's house to try to kill him.
But why would a dude who thinks he's a woman try to kill a justice over the issue of abortion?
Because at this point, they're all connected. These trans activists, they just merge all of this together. So abortion rights, they believe, they kind of just morph them all. So abortion rights, I don't actually like to say abortion rights. I think that's a fake right. But abortion, climate change, all of these issues, they kind of push it together, and they say it's worth violence. It's worth killing someone over. It's worth hurting someone, hurting their family. So Nicholas Roski, who apparently at the time identified as a woman, had kind of was going under the radar, but on some online forums was referring to himself as a transgender woman and had weird furry affiliation, I think. My colleague Luke Rosiak dove into all of this, and he knows all these weird, gross details. We were just chatting about it the other day. But Nicholas Roski goes. He ends up calling the police on himself right outside Kavanaugh's house, partially because he pulls up ready to kill the Supreme Court justice and possibly his family. And he sees that there are federal authorities parked outside. So he chickens out. He calls the cops on himself. They take him in. And now, years later, we find out that his defense attorneys are referring to him as a she, her, Sophie Roski. And, we broke this news because at the same time, we had just seen that the Covenant the Covenant Christian shooter in Nashville, a girl who identified as a guy, shot children at a Christian school in Nashville. And then years later, at Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis, another young man who identified as transgender shot and killed Catholic school children as they prayed at the first school mass of the year. And
Charlie Kirk's assassin seemed very motivated by trans ideology,
absolutely.
too.
Charlie Kirk's assassin was living with a guy who identified as trans. We don't know the full story on this shooter yet and what his, what else we could know about this trans affiliation here. I'm very interested and disturbed. And now we know that the man who tried to kill Kavanaugh also identified as transgender. And something I haven't talked about, Vince. I was there. I saw all the protesters who would go to Kavanaugh's house. A disturbing number of them were trans. A disturbing number of these protesters were people who thought that they were in the wrong body and were living and dressing as men when they were women or women when they were men. And so this was a threat to the justice on multiple levels. And like we were just talking about, these people who are waving the transgender flag, they believe that there's, in some cases, a justification for violence to defend these specific rights.
Talk about living inside of the Matrix.
Yeah.
Because what they're doing is they're leading fictional lives. They create a fantasy world that they occupy.
Right.
And they get angry anytime reality intrudes upon it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's to the point that they want to perpetrate acts of violence, which is actually, speaking of the Matrix, you know what the end of that story is?
I actually don't really remember the Matrix.
So the Matrix, it's okay. You don't have to remember the movie, but the people who made it were the Wachowski brothers. There were these guys who the brothers made the Matrix trilogy. They now identify as trans.
No way.
They call themselves women now. They're both of them. They both identify as women. They say they're the Wachowski sisters now.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that crazy? So they made a whole movie about escaping fiction and like living in the real world, taking the red pill, getting away from the fantasies that are created in order to hold us down. And the end of the saga for them is that they dove into the fantasy world and rejected reality. They took the blue pill. Isn't that crazy?
Wild.
It is crazy. Anyway, the point of all of that, I just went on a wild detour, but the point of all of this is a really disturbing trend of people who are living within delusions, and those delusions are not merely dangerous to themselves, but are increasingly very dangerous to the rest of us.
Absolutely. And I mean, Vince, I wrote a whole book on this, on the effects of testosterone, estrogen on your body, on these transgender hormonal changes that they cause in you. All these young people who are taking these